This is NewsDesk. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Jason Miller, here today with a special guest. We have with us today Detective Roger Baker of the Madison, Wisconsin Police Department. We are dedicating this entire show to the issue of crime and policing. Now, Roger's background is a Bachelor of Science and a Master's in Criminal Justice, postgraduate work in interviews and interrogation, criminal law, and physical evidence. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, let's get started. Question one. Many questions for you today. First thing is, has the national crime rate decreased in this last 10 years? I know back in the 80s and 90s or whatever, there was a big drop in crime, but how's it doing this last decade, we'll say?
Last decade, actually, there's been a decrease for a number of different reasons, different factors, but actually punishments have been going up, particularly for drug offenses, but actually the crime rate has been going down. Last couple of years, though, however, there's been an increase in violent assaults on police, but overall, crime's kind of stabilizing now, but it was on a decline for a while.
So, longer sentences, more people behind bars, so that has made it so there's less of those guys out there?
Some people believe that it's up for interpretation. It could be for a number of different factors.
All right, and now this whole thing with DNA evidence, I take it that's been a big help?
It has been a big help.
So, when guys are arrested, or I guess convicted, they're automatically, their DNA is recorded, is that the idea?
Not all the time. Usually when someone has a felony conviction or a conviction for a certain type of an offense, like a sexual assault, they'll have to submit DNA, and that gets entered into a national data bank. And so then when we process physical evidence, we can submit that to see if it would match to any DNA that's in the system.
And that would seem to make it easier to convict people, because if you have this database of 5 or 6 million sort of guys that have been in the system, you're more likely to have a match.
There can be a match just for, to be certain and not to make mistakes. We usually would have to get a search warrant and then get a sample from our suspect just to double check and make sure that it is a correct match.
Right. Even if there was a sample of DNA taken years before, you want to be sure it's really the same guy, that wasn't mixed up in paperwork, that kind of thing?
That's correct. In DNA, it's been used to exonerate people that have been wrongfully convicted of violent crime.
That's good. That's good to hear. All right, let's go on. What about the Internet? Have you found that the Internet has helped you solve crimes?
It's helped us solve crimes. That's true. It's been a tool we can try to track sometimes people's locations by IP addresses. We can maybe gain information on communications they've had with people on social media sites, email, Facebook, other messaging systems. But it also requires a lot of technical construction of drafting of search warrants and subpoenas for that. It's also created a venue for offenders to commit a lot of different types of crime over the Internet as well.
Yeah, you mean identity theft and all those things?
Correct.
Yeah, that's right. All right. But you suppose that most, especially large police departments, have a department that does Internet research, Internet work?
I think large departments would try to. I know many departments have one or several detectives or investigators that obtain training to be able to do that. It's an evolving field that requires kind of consistent work to adapt to the changes that are developed.
All right. Now this is a question a lot of people have, so they wanted me to ask you this. But how does actual police work that you deal with differ from what we see on television, on police shows?
It's not the same amount of action, and it takes a lot longer. So sometimes a case will take a number of months, or if it's a lengthy, involved investigation, it could take over a year, to complete. So it's lots of paperwork, lots of interviews. It's interesting, but it's more sometimes methodical than dynamic.
Well, let's run through that. Just I'm curious, just what goes on step by step when a crime has happened, and you have a suspect. Let's start with maybe it's not the beginning actually, but at some point there's going to be an interrogation, an
Right.
interview process with the suspect.
Correct.
So what actually goes on there in the interrogation room?
Interrogations are, it takes strategy and skill, and depending on the type of offense, ideally, when a detective or an investigator interviews a suspect, you would want to know as much as you can find out about them or their involvement before conducting the interview. Otherwise, if you don't have access to that information, sometimes it becomes a fact-finding interview, and so you want to try to gain as much information as you can, open-ended questions, that type of a strategy.
Well, but fact-finding, isn't that what the purpose of the interview would be?
It is, but interviews don't just involve suspects. It involves people that know the suspects and that may have information about background that may be useful. So
So you bring in other people that know the suspect, like witnesses or just people that know him that maybe have heard some other things that he's talked about?
ideally, if you're looking at somebody for a suspect and you're trying to ascertain whether they're actually the one that may have committed an offense or trying to gain an admission or confession, ideally it would be nice to have as much information as you can ahead of time.
So I guess you would want to have all of these people come in first and have the suspects come in last.
Ideally, but sometimes things don't work that way.
I see. I
Right.
see. All right, very good. Others have been curious about this too, which I discussed with you just before we went on.
Right.
The good cop, bad cop, is that done much? And is it effective?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that's it's a reference. It's kind of an older reference from movies. Years ago, there was this idea that they would have a team of detectives, and one would be aggressive and put pressure on the suspect, and the other would be more forgiving. But that's everybody has their own style, and I don't see that very often.
Of course, the suspect, if he refuses to talk, no matter what the questions are, what do you do then?
You can't make somebody talk if they have the right not to talk. They have constitutional rights and due process. And as far as the good cop, bad cop, I think people are pretty intelligent that we speak to, and I think they can see through things like that. But
Right.
if somebody doesn't speak, we have to respect that.
So you just say, thanks for coming in?
You can't make somebody. They have rights about self-incrimination.
I see. All right. Well, let's move on to a case. It's probably the most talked about criminal case going on right now as far as the media, and that's the Trayvon Martin, Mr. Zimmerman case. For
Yes.
those of you that haven't come across this in the news, Mr. Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin. Yes, according to Mr. Zimmerman, in self-defense, but Mr. Zimmerman is looks like going to stand trial for second-degree murder. What do you think about this case?
It's a very interesting case. It's difficult to give a concise assessment. Whenever you have a case that's a high-profile case, it's in the media, the public and different media venues want as much information as possible. It's difficult. The more information that's disclosed, it makes it difficult to find a fair and impartial jury. So it's hard to make an assessment without all the facts. But it should be an interesting case.
Well, I haven't read anything in a few days, so I don't know what the latest is, but the last I read, Mr. Zimmerman claims that Trayvon Martin had come back and had punched him and had him down on the ground.
Yes.
Of course, the other side says that's not the case, that Mr. Zimmerman was trailing him and shot him for no apparent reason except for his look. Mr. Zimmerman suspected he was, I don't know, a thief or something.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It looks like, from what I've seen, that Mr. Zimmerman was acting in a proactive fashion. Had called the Sanford police and the dispatcher had advised him not to continue following, and so I think that's going to be one of the aspects that comes under scrutiny.
Oh, and somebody was screaming on the tape. So, will they be able to tell whose voice it was? Can they do a voice print of Zimmerman, since he's the one still alive, and compare it with the voice on the tape?
I'm not certain. I know that there's been some analysis of that of the tape, and I haven't heard anything definitive, and I'm not sure which type of techniques they'll use or whether he'll cooperate with that.
I'm just getting that from TV shows.
Right.
There's something about a voice print where it shows all the lines.
Yeah, there's some equipment that.
And I guess they see if the lines match.
I'm not honestly I'm not certain how it works. I know that there's ways to do analysis on voice and audio.
I see. All right. Well, this brings a couple of more terms to us here. That are related to this Trayvon Martin case. It deals with gun carry laws in states like Florida. So we have several terms. We have castle doctrine and we have stand your ground. Most states have, I take it, the castle doctrine. Florida and some others have stand your ground. Would you explain to our viewers what these two are?
The castle doctrine actually is a term that was carried forward from English common law. And this is back in the 17th century, but the phrase was that every person's home is their castle or like their castle, and they should be able to defend themselves in their home. And so the castle doctrine that's been adopted in a number of states here, basically it authorizes homeowners, if they're lawfully in their home and somebody forcibly enters with the intention of doing harm, or their perception of the intention of doing harm, if they're frightened, they can defend themselves with deadly force. So.
What about the person that gets shot on your front porch? You have to drag him back in?
No. No. I know, like, sometimes it applies to a place of business, vehicle, or a home.
But you hear about that. There's sort of like this the sense out there that if that should ever happen, where you end up shooting the guy, and I guess he falls out the front door and onto the porch or something, you're supposed to drag him back in.
No.
The problem is, though, when the police come, there's going to be this blood trail.
No, should never do that. Never do that.
So that would be bad.
So, no, should never do that.
I see. So, somebody breaks into your house, somebody that's a stranger, and you fear for your life, then you're okay to pull the trigger.
I think it's a judgment call, but I think the object of the law was to give people an option. I know in Wisconsin, prior to adoption of that bill, you could use deadly force to protect your life or the life of your family, but not your property.
I see. All right, so that's the castle doctrine. That's, I don't know how many states have that. The majority, I suppose. There's only one state